James is showing us that the confession of sin is a part of fellowship, and it is a necessity of the church. It is not how we receive salvation from God, but it is how we walk in freedom from sin. Here's the thing. You don't confess your sin. I don't confess my sin to Butch so that God will forgive me. I confess my sin to Butch because somehow in that relationship, God is going to use Butch to strengthen me and to give me the power to overcome temptation so that I don't go back into that sin. There is something that happens in the relationship that begins to cleanse me from unrighteousness. The forgiveness is done. Now I need to be changed. See, and too many of us have only been told about the forgiveness. Too many of us are just confessing our sins so we can be forgiven and go to heaven. But there's a confession, and then there's supposed to be a transformation. Because why were we created? To be like Jesus. And I need more than forgiveness to be like Jesus. I would hope we all agree on that. We've lived enough to understand. I need more than forgiveness to be like Jesus. And so what is this place that we have not invested enough into? It's confession of sin to one another. So often we allow sin to lead us into isolation. But James is teaching us to bring our sin into fellowship. Don't hide it, confess it. Don't be ashamed of sin. Be confident in our church relationships. Don't fear condemnation. Trust in the forgiveness and redemption you've been given. Don't remove yourself from the body. Rely on your connection to the body. Listen, don't raise your hands. But haven't we all been, and maybe some of us are right now, in places where the only thing we didn't do was confess our sin? We cried over it. We were sorry for it. We promised God we would never do it again. We reorganized our lives to try to effectively keep ourselves from ever going back to it. And what have we discovered? All of that stuff works for a little while, and then somehow I find myself right back in the cycle of sin all over again. How many of us have started to realize, and maybe tonight's the night where we begin to realize, the only thing I've never done with this is confess it to one another. And maybe that's the thing that breaks the yoke. Maybe that's the thing that stops the cycle. Maybe that's the thing that frees me not only from the sin, but the guilt and the shame and the weakness that I have felt because I keep going back to it. What is the most common complaint about or accusation against us as Christians? It's hypocrisy, right? I don't want to go to church. It's filled with hypocrites. It's either hypocrisy or money. Those are the two. We're either all thieves or we're all hypocrites, one or the other. But that's basically why people that aren't Christians say that they aren't Christians. But what does it really mean to be a hypocrite? Because that word gets thrown around an awful lot. In fact, Jesus used the word. He referred to the Sadducees and the Pharisees as hypocrites. He told his disciples, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And then he explained it. He says, it's hypocrisy. See, what it literally means is to play a part, to pretend, or to act. See, a hypocrite is not someone that continues to fail or struggle. It's someone who refuses to acknowledge their failures and their struggles. A hypocrite is someone who stands in judgment of others while living in sin themselves. So do you know what the cure for hypocrisy is? Do you know what true deliverance comes from? Confession. It's what happened when Isaiah saw God and he said, I'm ruined. I'm a man of unclean lips. Nobody asked, but Isaiah knew I need to say it. It's what happened when Nathan stood in front of David and said, you're the man. And David didn't make any more excuses. He says, yes, it's me. I did this thing. It's what happened when Paul yielded to Jesus in his blindness on the road to Damascus. It's what happened when several thousand people interrupted Peter in the middle of a sermon and said, brethren, what must we do to be saved? It's confession. And you notice there's so many more. But what happened with Isaiah? Everything in his life changed. What happened in David? God gave him a new heart. What happened with Paul? He went from being against the way to being the apostle out of the way. And what happened to those thousands who interrupted Peter? They were saved that day. Confession changes everything. And notice this. Other than Isaiah, it wasn't confession to God. It was confession to the people that God had put in their lives. David told Nathan. The men told Peter and Peter and the other apostles. Paul told Ananias, if we will not confess our sin to one another, we will not be free of our sin. We might be forgiven of it, But I hope you're getting to be like me, where forgiveness isn't enough. Where it's not enough to know that God won't hold it against me. I want to be free from it. I don't want it to be a part of my life anymore. I don't want it to have any room in me anymore. And I'll be honest with you with this. If there is something the Bible tells us to do to be free from sin, I want to believe that we are willing to do it. That freedom from sin is important enough that we will do whatever the Bible tells us. True deliverance, true fellowship are both found in confession.